Hello there my RPG lovers and welcome to another video. Superfuse is a comic book styled hack and slash action RPG with a rich and accessible skill customization system. This game has been released on January 31st in early access and the full release will be later this year. You can play this game in solo offline or multiplayer online with up to 4-player co-op. The game has 3 different classes and you can fuse multiple superpowers to hyper-tailor your hero based on your playstyle. Many thanks to Raw Fury and Stitchhead Entertainment for sponsoring this video. You can use my link in the description to buy the game on Steam if you like what you see in the video. That being said, we're going to talk about what I consider to be the best starting build to play. Elementalist is the most beginner-friendly class for a couple of reasons. It has the best crowd control spells and very good damage, especially when you manage to find the right fuses. Superfuse encourages you to experiment a lot with the fuse system, which I highly recommend. Fuses are basically skill modifiers which can totally change the way you play the game. They are random item drops, but you can also buy some of them in the city from various merchants. If you have no clue what I'm talking about, I recommend watching my previous video about Superfuse. In that video, I tried to explain all the fundamentals like the fuse system, skill modes and every other important thing you should know about the game before you start playing it. I'm going to assume that you already know the fundamentals of the fuse system. We're going to talk about a specific build related to the fuse system. So let's start talking about my most favorite beginner builds. I started playing the game with a Berserker first, and after that I went back and tried out the Elementalist, and I kinda regretted for not starting with this class first. If you can't tell by the footage, Elementalist gameplay is extremely fun because of those crazy AoE spells. Combined with the amazing crowd control from the Frost talent tree, you can quickly become very effective at wiping out the full screen of enemies in the game. Superfuse can have some very big difficulty spikes, especially if you just rush through the map without doing any quests. If you suddenly feel very weak, that's probably because of the higher level enemies that you just encountered on the new map that you entered. However, Frost Elementalists can usually handle this with ease if you have the right build and a bit of luck with some item drops. When you start a new game, just make sure to select the Frost option to get this build going. It's not like you would make a mistake with fire spells, but like I said before, frost spells have a much greater crowd control. That's why I consider it to be very beginner friendly, because Superfuse enemies don't mess around. Anyway, at the very beginning of the game, you already have 2 very useful spells for killing weaker enemies. Frost Blades and the default range attack from your Power Glove. The ranged attack from the Power Glove can be very useful at first, but only as a filler damage spell when you're out of energy. Frost Blades is the first spell in the Frost tree. You're going to use this spell a lot at first, until you hit level 11. But later on, if you want to follow this build, Frost Blades is going to become a secondary output of damage, only in certain situations. And this is the only melee skill for Elementalist. The reason why that's important is the specific fuse that you're going to use in these builds. That fuse is called Dash, and it allows you to, well, dash around the map. This is extremely helpful for kiting enemies all around the map, especially if your movement speed is low. The dash fuse is kinda rare, it only dropped for me once, so I don't know how lucky you're going to be. If you don't manage to get it soon, I recommend trying to build your movement speed with the items you're going to find. Like I said, Frost Blades are going to be very useful below level 10, especially when you get the Chill spell. You can unlock this spell when you hit level 5, assuming you invested all of your points into the mastery skill. This spell can help you a lot in general, especially with Frost Blades. That's because you can keep your distance with enemies and almost take no hits while trying to get that strong third attack in a row from the Frost Blades. You can get the second spell very fast in the tree and it's called Ice Shards. Now here's the thing, I recommend focusing more on Ice Shard at first, but this all depends on what kind of RNG you have with the fuses. Although there are some very common fuses that you're probably going to get very fast, like Ricochet. This fuse alone can help you a lot with AoE damage, especially in the early game. Once you get your hands on the Glacier spell, you're going to feel quite a power boost, especially if you have some good fuses to use on this spell. As you can see here, this is going to be your progression up to this point. You want to unlock the Glacier spell ASAP, which will be at level 11 at soonest. Some other passive nodes in the tree are important as well, but you should go for these major nodes first. Simple enough, you just dump all of your points until you unlock all the available spells. The thing that you might didn't know about these empty slots on the tree, they're actually improving your mastery. Mastery gives you a lot more damage and a lot more extra buffs to certain stats, as you can see here. Once you finally unlock Glacier, it won't mean much unless you have some good fuses to modify this ability. One of the first fuses I started using on this spell is the critical hit chance. It's pretty self-explanatory and it works great with this spell. You're going to depend a lot on those big crit numbers, so it's a no-brainer really, and it only requires 10 capacity. The second very important fuse for this build to work is the zigzag fuse. First of all, this fuse increases the damage of the spell quite a bit, which is obviously very useful. Second of all, it does exactly what the name suggests, it will zigzag around your character. The last reason why I want to use this fuse is also really important. It prolongs the final attack of the spell, it makes it slower basically. This seems to work better against a larger group of enemies because it allows you to hit them more effectively. You can queue a couple of Glacier spells in a row and just kite the enemies around the spell until it activates for some big damage. Of course, you can use it without the zigzag fuse as well, and it will be a lot faster, but I prefer it this way. Speaking of slowing down, here is another fuse that I use on the spell called exactly like that. It slows down your projectiles and it increases your damage, simple as that. Sync is another name of the fuse that I like to use on this spell. This fuse mirrors projectiles behind your character, which obviously makes it really useful, you get even more crowd control. Then we have energy cost reduction fuse, and it's basically essential if you don't want to spam the energy potion every couple of seconds. With this fuse equipped, you'll be able to cast Glacier for days without depleting your energy pool.
Let's take a look.
Those will be the fuses I recommend using for the Glacier spell. You could theoretically get all of these fuses in the early game, but like I said, it will depend on your RNG. I tried experimenting with some other fuses like homing, which gives the spell a very nice visual effect, but it's not very useful if you ask me. It makes the spell too random, I like to group enemies together and just blast them. Another fuse I don't recommend using on Glacier is Ricochet. Ricochet reduces the damage of a spell by 10%, and the effect is not very useful for Glacier in my experience. Then we have Shrapnel, which seems like a great fuse to combine with this combination. I tried it and I failed to notice any major difference. This fuse requires a lot of capacity as well, and I think you could use those extra 15 capacity points a lot better. You can try to combine something else with Glacier, or maybe reserve those extra capacity points for another spell. I mentioned before the fuse called Dash, which is great in combination with your Frostblades. So make sure you have those extra 10 points of capacity when you get this fuse. When it comes to the gear I'm wearing, it's nothing special actually. Naturally, you will want to prioritize stats like energy regeneration and frost damage of course. The two-handed mace I've been wearing is extremely helpful with this build. This is a unique quality mace, so you would think you need to be very lucky with this drop, but I got two of them. So it wasn't that rare in my case. If you don't manage to find this mace, using the best power glove you can find can be a good idea. But if you're wondering about the damage of your ability, just equip a new weapon, cast your abilities, and then check the damage number again. That's the best way to ensure you're using the weapon, which gives your abilities the biggest damage outputs. And that will be all for this beginner Superfuse build. I didn't mention two very powerful spells in this skill tree, but when you get to unlock the Comet, you won't be a beginner anymore. Like I said before, the Elementalist has become my favorite class, and I wish I played it first. I highly recommend playing this class, even if you don't plan to follow this exact build. The fuse system highly encourages you to experiment with your skills. Once again, many thanks to Raw Fury and Stitchhead Entertainment for sponsoring this video. Don't forget to use the link in the description if you plan to buy the game on Steam. If you like the video or you find it useful, pressing the like button and subscribing to the channel would be highly appreciated. And if you wanna go a step further, you can always become a Patreon or a YouTube member. Even the smallest support amount means a lot. Thanks a lot to all of my current supporters, and I'll see you in the next one.